All right, thank you. So this is a big topic on my slide today. I usually get to brief about the Integrated Ocean Observing System. I usually like to ask an audience, have you heard an IOOS talk before? Raise your hand. Okay, so that's about 60%. That's good. I'm often at a 90% level for folks that have heard a talk before. I've borrowed slides from folks for this. I'm trying to tie it into the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and set up some of our discussions for later in the afternoon where we have a town hall session, and we're going to want your input into that session as well. So hopefully this will get your thoughts going a little bit for that. To start off, I'll give a little bit of background on IOOS and what we're about, and then I'll share some slides that one of my office, one of the folks in my office who is the lead for the planning team for the North Atlantic UN Decade workshop that's coming up in January. And so she put some slides together for a few briefings earlier this fall, and I'll share her slides with you. And then I'll try to end on a lighter note and with a sort of a storytelling point, which is one of the ways we get people's attention in this world of ocean science and technology. So IOOS is authorized in legislation since 2009. We're supposed to integrate coastal ocean Great Lakes data from the head of tide to the EEZ within the United States. The 4 mission areas here are a lumping of 7 societal benefit areas. It's everything you could imagine from healthy oceans that's in the societal development goals to security, food security, commerce and transportation, weather prediction, climate prediction, all sorts of things. And we're supposed to do that through partnerships. We're supposed to integrate data with 17 federal agencies within the US government. We're supposed to do that with 11 geographic regional associations within the United States. They're non-federal entities that work at the local and regional level to bring data and information together for decision support. Those are mandated by our legislation, those non-federal entities. So we have this blended partnership framework from non-federal to federal, and the regions are certified for data management by NOAA, and they get tort liability protection. If there's ever a result that were to happen from the use of data that turned out bad and there was a lawsuit, they would have federal tort liability protection as if they're federal employees. So that's a pretty important stamp of approval. And we've got academia, state, local, tribe, governments, and private industry all interfused in the work that we do. So we do this triple helix all the time, and that's one of the reasons we have a tight fit with TMA and BlueTech Week. And oh, by the way, we're supposed to integrate with the Global Ocean Observing System and connect to international activities like the Group on Earth Observations and the GEOS, which is the Global Earth Observation System of Systems. So predicting our ocean future, I'm not going to try to predict our ocean future today, but I wanted to reference a few points. You all know about the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. We just had OceanOBS 19, an international conference in Hawaii in September, which is built off of 2 previous decadal conferences, OceanOBS 99 and OceanOBS 09. We're already planning for OceanOBS 2029. And for OceanOBS 19, which was held in Hawaii, we had the largest number of participants ever, up to 1,500. And we all participated in writing community white papers on subjects related to ocean observations going up to that meeting, and many of those have been published. So what we're doing now is trying to use that body of work, take the information and recommendations from the conference and the white papers, and then say, what are we going to do next? What are the actions we're going to take moving forward? And on the far right, as you look at the screen, is a document that came out in November. And that's the White House's Office of Science and Technology policy document, which is Ocean Science and Technology, a Decadal Vision. And if you read that document, there's a lot of good, righteous information in there about what we should be doing for ocean science and technology within the United States. And that's a reference point that I urge you to look at, and many of the things that we might talk about for the UN Decade would be applicable to that. So know your audience and know which document you should reference. And if you're going in to talk to the White House, talk to them about their document and how we're helping with that. If you're going to the UN, talk to them about this activity. So this is a shamelessly stolen slide that had crazy animations, and I'm starting halfway through a bunch that I took out. Melissa Iwamoto, the director of PAC IOOS, used this slide and presented it at OceanOBS 19. And I'm going to highlight the main points of this. The points here are that in meeting needs of customers at the coast, at our coastal communities, we have a process that's iterative, and if you're going to actually try to support these users with coastal and ocean data, the first step is tailoring your engagement with them to identify their needs. And that doesn't mean bringing them a widget and tell them, we have this and you can use it. It means going to the communities and finding out what their plain language needs are and figuring out whether there is a tool or a product that you already have that then you can maybe share with them. The next step is to design and refine the products with those users. The next step is to engage with them again to see how those products and services are working, and then adjust those again and repeat that cycle and rinse and repeat. And it's this sort of co-development idea where to actually find the benefit, you're going to have to find the users and make sure you're working with them. And I referenced that earlier today when I mentioned Samoa and their need for wave data, and they don't have internet and they do have email, so we adjusted a product and service for that. Melissa was part of a team that wrote a white paper about this subject, and she used this graphic at OceanObs 19. So all of those papers are published in Frontiers magazine, and so it's Melissa Iwamoto et al. That are responsible for this idea at the conference. And these are just a bunch of amazing pictures of the user communities in PAC-IOOS that they work with this type of information. So back to the program highlights for IOOS for 2020 moving forward, there's some things up on the slide here that are important to note. We had new legislation passed just recently called the Commercial Engagement Through Ocean Technology Act, and that tells NOAA to coordinate all unmanned systems development work across the agency and to do that with other agencies and specifically to work very closely with Navy. So we're doing that more moving forward, and we've had 2 implementation planning meetings with Navy so far, and we're coordinating more with them on their advanced naval technology exercises that they coordinate extensively for a whole year. They've got a call open right now that closes December 4th for their 2020 Antex exercises. Those are coordinated from the Rhode Island Newark office and with the Gulfport and Stennis community down in Mississippi, but they do vignettes that are demonstrations of technology and unmanned systems working together, like ones that we've seen today, and they're asking for proposals right now. So look on the Navy's call for opportunities. And then the Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act of 2017 passed, and then it was reauthorized with a new title in 2019 under the National Integrated Drought Information System. And so we refer those as Weather Act 1.0 and 2.0 in NOAA. And there's a lot of information organizing the way we do our research and development and transition that into operations and improve our weather delivery. And there's specific reference to the ocean service and ocean data being provided, not just ocean service, but OAR and the global ocean system too. And Craig's famous bumper sticker line is, if you like your 7-day forecast, thank an oceanographer. And we're trying to use that and take that around the world and get folks to pay attention to the ocean data. And other things going on with regard to the blue economy, the IOOS office took on an effort to capture and describe the ocean enterprise within the U.S. back in 2015, and we published a report we called the Ocean Enterprise Study in 2016. And Tyler had on his slides, there was one slide with a U.S. map with red dots of different size on it. And that's from our study that showed where the technology companies are in the U.S. that are doing ocean observing, mapping, and predicting, either as a provider company getting the data and bringing it back, or as an intermediary company doing something with that data. So we're now repeating that study. Back in 2016, we found over 400 companies, $7 billion in revenue specific to the ocean enterprise activities. So we're going to repeat that study over the next 6 to 8 months, try to get results for 2019, 2020, and we'll see what the trends are over the last 4 years. And then research and development activities and the funding that comes out of the IOOS office. We've got a coastal ocean modeling test bed. We've doubled the funding to external principal investigator-driven, academic-driven modeling in the coastal and ocean U.S. We're connecting those models to the National Water Model as part of the NOAA Water Initiative. We've also got Ocean Technology Transition Project funding within the U.S. IOOS office that is designed to take technologies from technology readiness 6, 7, or 8 up to the next level above. And technology readiness level 9 is operational. So this is on the right side of that, what you sometimes hear, the Valley of Death. We've also got some planned workshops with the OAR labs and cooperative institutes within NOAA and the IOOS regional associations to try to coordinate better and align our research and development activities and our calls for proposal over time so that we're having a better better use of the expertise to apply to the specific decisions that are needed today. And now I'm going to shift, and I borrowed from presentation to the Subcommittee on Ocean Science and Technology by Jessica Snowden. So Jessica's in my office, and she's been nominated to be on the lead team for the North Atlantic Workshop. And so just as a reminder, a clean ocean, a healthy and resilient ocean, a predicted ocean, a safe ocean, a sustainable, productive ocean, and a transparent and accessible ocean. So you've seen many of these goals before, and it's important to have the goals at this level, and then it's important to figure out what can we do now, what can we do in the next few years, what can we do within the next decade. So the Decadal Priorities are also shown here. We've got a little bit of a slide mess up there, but modernizing our infrastructure and promoting economic prosperity, resilient communities, safeguarding human health, and ensuring maritime security, and on and on. And so I wanted to put these up here for reference so that you've all seen them in the context of the day. And then the preparatory phase that Margaret referenced, this is planning towards the next year. The decade starts in 2021, and so over the next year there's a series of workshops. And the one that Jessica's attending and leading participation in is January 7th in Halifax. There's one in February in Mexico. There's one in the Southeast Pacific in Guayaquil in 2019. Did that already happen? September. The South Atlantic Workshop is Rio, November 25 through 27, so next week. Indian Ocean next year. The Pacific Community Workshop was already held in July, I believe, and the Tokyo Workshop in July, August as well. And so these are bringing folks together to bring in ideas about how to advance the goals of the UN decade. And so we want your opinions at the table as well this afternoon. And now back to what we've decided to do within the IOOS community in the US with the IOOS regions and our IOOS office is we're going to engage in those regional workshops. We've started a document we're calling our Grand Challenges for the Next Decade document. We've boiled it down to 6 grand challenges. One of them is mapping in seabed 2030, for instance. One of them is data management and data analytics. Another is how to accelerate research and development. Another is water levels and storm surge in coastal communities. And so we're trying to write these down as living documents that we will take to the workshops as a 2-pager that anyone from our community can take with the ideas that we know. So this is sort of I say living documents because we're not all done with that document. We couldn't do it fast enough for all these workshops. The workshops are going to be happening over the next year. So we're reviewing those drafts and using them now and then improving them if we get comments or feedback as we go. We're going to feed those to our Federal Advisory Committee. We're going to feed them into the Interagency Ocean Observation Committee, which is the federal level body within the US under the OSTP that works these issues. And we're going to tie those to those recommendations from Ocean Obs 19 and those white papers. So trying to knit together the things that we already know, the things that we already have going, and then identify new important actions to advance the ball, to advance these societal goals. And that's how we're taking the approach over the next year. And Jessica's contact information is here. This is not my last slide. I have 2 more fun slides. And my contact info, in case you have questions about what I said that Jessica doesn't know about. And then the next thing, I'm going to shift gears here for a second. I'm going to present to you something, and I have more audience participation. Who here has watched or seen or cares a little bit about the Game of Thrones series? Okay, some folks don't admit it, some folks do. That's about 30%. The first time I asked that question at a science and tech audience, it was like 10%. So for those who don't know Game of Thrones, you don't have to care or learn about it, but the overarching context I'm about to give you is there's a realm where there's kingdoms, and there's people, and then there's a wall in the north of the realm, and there's monsters that are dangerous, that kill people, that are trying to come down into the realm. And there's a wall, and there's people that stand watch on the wall, and they're called the Night's Watch. So this was really popular, and we've been doing this amazing work in the oceans, and I thought, you know what? We're doing work related to this. And they say in that show, winter's coming, and I'm like, the storms are coming. This is the hurricane tracks in the globe and typhoon tracks. And so I'm repeating for you a little hokey thing I did at the Mid-Atlantic Maricou's meeting this year, and some of the folks at Rutgers University have been leaders in helping to get gliders out in front of hurricanes, and we've got lots of different capabilities, but here's what I did. Storms gather and the watch begins, so we've got this hurricane intensity forecasting team. And hear my words and bear witness to my vow. This is the glider speaking. It shall not end until batteries fail. I bring ocean data through darkness. I am a watcher under waves. I am a drone that guards the realm. I bring our ocean to models for this season and seasons to come. So, storms are coming. We need ocean observations to watch the realm, and we need to apply them to meet the societal benefit goals of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And we need to reach a diverse audience. My panel had all men on it. If anyone didn't notice, next year we need to have some women on the panel. I put this up there and I asked you who had heard or hadn't heard. When I did this at Maricou's, 10% had heard about it. I got a huge, all of the Sea Grant Fellow Network was going nuts because they loved this. So I reached a younger audience with this story. So we've got to find ways to tell the stories to get to different audiences and get passion around these issues. So that's it for my talk, and I'm happy to take questions. And I've left you lots of time because I think dialogue's a good thing. I can ask you questions if you want.
Carl, break the ice.
All right.
Put you on the spot. The IOOS program, thank you, sir. The IOOS program, authorized by Congress, is a constitution of multiple federal agencies. Without being, putting you too hard on a hard edge, largely it's NOAA-led. Where and how are the other agencies participating? Because with other agency participation, perhaps in a more grand way, I would suggest that we could be reaching a farther breadth in the academic community, given programs that might exist in those other agencies. Is NOAA pretty much carrying the ball on this, or are there other agencies that you could point to that are really joining in the pursuit of the integrated ocean observing system? Thank you.
Great question. So the answer is there are definitely other agencies contributing. There is an evergreen challenge of attribution, and we are competitive in this world, and so we have to be able to give credit where credit is due, and that's an impediment and a challenge sometimes. We've got amazing support from folks like the Army Corps of Engineers CDIP program that runs those wave buoys. So that's a backbone component with data management processes in place, and we can add a wave buoy to a community that needs it, and we don't have to build the back-end system for that. So that's happening in many places thanks to the Army Corps. We have extensive funding from NASA and BOEM and ONR on the Marine Biodiversity Observation Network projects, which we're creating baseline biodiversity data where it does not exist. We've been doing that for about 7 years to the tune of $2 to $3 million a year from those other agencies. We've got an animal telemetry network coordinator within NOAA sitting in my office on contract, fully funded by BOEM, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management Funds. And that's also supported by the Office of Naval Research. And so there's some real cases where funding is coming in and making a difference. And so what we've got to do is highlight those and show them to others and make sure that their leadership understands how valuable this is to make it work. I've got a challenge in that I don't have operational funding from some of those that are now research and development type activities. And I've even got ocean tech transition funding, but I have a little bit of a donut hole in operations funding for new technologies that we transition. And so do we take away from something we're running now to run something new? Well, that's a hugely difficult decision. The Ocean Observatories Initiative is a huge investment by the National Science Foundation. We heard about how WHOI is helping to advance that earlier today. And so that's bringing the cabled observatory capabilities to bear to support science, and how we advance some of our technologies together is advancing faster because of that. So there are several examples of how it's happening, and I think the Navy coordination, they sent us 9 gliders this year to add to the hurricane storm gliders, and they sent about that many last year, and we're going to continue that into next year. And with the C-Note legislation, they're really keen to help keep U.S. investments keeping companies going, and they're worried about the pace with which they can get new programs of record within Navy. And if that's too slow, do we lose expertise in U.S. companies who have to go market their wares elsewhere? And so we're in talks with them about how do we advance our Antex exercises that they've been doing where the companies come voluntarily, and is there a way to add a little bit of seed money to that process to be able to keep people at that table, get them there sooner and keep them there a little longer? So that's a few answers to that question. Michael.
The study that was done, 2016, you're now doing the update, that had obviously a big economic component to it. And as I remember the story, I think that really helped in terms of allocations of funding for IOOS. And so I'd ask you, taking the incredible work that's done and putting in ROI, there's a lot of economic benefit to be derived by what we're doing. Talk a little about how that hopefully was helpful and how other people could learn from that. How can other institutions perhaps use that same kind of model, even with other parts of NOAA?
Well, so I don't have a specific line of sight to an increase that happened because of that study, for instance. We have been getting increased funding over the last 3 years in the IOOS line items, specifically to fill in gaps in the network of HF radar for surface current monitoring. And then, so that was the Senate, and then the House said, and fly more underwater gliders, and gave us some increased funding to do that. And that's partially attributable to the IOOS regional structure. The regions are able to go advocate as non-federal players in ways that we cannot as federal players, and they figured out that saying, give us more funding to do good wasn't working. Using things like, we're helping the economy, here's this study, and here's some specific gaps on a map where we're not covering the ocean. That was actually something that made sense to the appropriators, and they responded with more appropriations. We've also been in a macro context of Congress funding more in the last 3 years than they had been before that, and there's lots of reasons for that as well. One of the things in the Ocean Enterprise study that we did is, I said providers and intermediary companies. There's the third bubble in a diagram that Ralph Rayner helped write in the 2012 IOOS Summit has end users underneath the providers and intermediaries. So that's the gold standard. We want to measure what the end user value is. But to really do that right, you've got to get to each decision made and then run the value of that decision made and then run that all the way back to some ocean obs data. And it's extremely complicated because the number of observations that might go into a decision support tool could be myriad from many different places. So I've been talking to some folks. One of the recommendations in a white paper on the blue economy for ocean obs, we said we should build some sort of digitized online catalog of use cases of ocean observing information. And Ralph Rayner and I have started talking about how to do that with OECD, with Monica Grasso, the the NOAA chief economist, so that those could be structured in a way that could be valued by economists. And you build individual use cases and build a catalog and a library and do that over time. And if we do that the same way internationally, we can really start to get at the ways to measure it that we haven't been able to before. Anything else?
I've got lots of questions. Got a few more minutes.
Yep.
So talk about how the IOOS works with its counterparts. And as you see, we're trying to attract clusters from around the world. So how can we work with IOOS and then indirectly through the GOOS to promote this community building, this ecosystem building in other parts of the world so that, NOAA does such incredible work. It's a gold standard really around the world. How do we kind of use that so that the Americans are doing a good job, again, trying to support ecosystem development around the world?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think a question I asked in my panel was what mechanisms for us to talk across the triple helix. So keep asking that question. When we have events like this, ask the participants, what can we do the same or differently next time to engage further and more in depth? In one of my favorite leadership trainings that I had, it talked about the power of networks. And your network that's really your near-term, to your immediate family is a network. And your extended family starts to be further networks away. And when you don't have a skill or a capability, first you try your near network, but then you go to your farther network. And that's where you're going to find capabilities you don't have. And that's what this work that you're doing with clusters strikes me as. You're expanding your network of networks approach. You're finding weak link network partners who might have something you don't have, and then you're strengthening that network partnership and getting something mutually beneficial out of it. And so that's the way we need to build capabilities as a community and get to the so what, to do what questions, and what actions can we actually take together to incrementally improve something. And one of the things that struck me today is the Grand Challenges document that we have doesn't talk about capacity development or workforce development, and those things are critical. And how are we going to do that too? And so that might need to get added to our Grand Challenges list. And when I say capacity development, I mean just providing a possibility to someone who doesn't have it in some cases. And so the Ocean Acidification Program has created OA in a box so they can take the kit to do observing to a community that needs that kind of information, and it is easily deployed and maintained, and they have training materials with it so that they can take that capability and teach them how to use it and maintain it in that community so that those who care about those waters and need to know about them will be able to maintain the observing assets that are needed at the same time. So many different use cases like that.
Yep, thank you. It's a very brief question. Do you think that the current structure of GOOS is providing the means and ways to bridge the gap of the probably 3 degrees of separation between IOOS and other regions as a way to share the knowledge, the expertise, or provide a mechanism for technology to be transferred or clusters to engage with other regions? I'm thinking in terms of the GOOS structure and your role as IOOS.
Yeah, but the initial part of your question, remind me, was do I think
Yeah,
this...
so it's the current structure of GOOS providing ways and means to achieve these goals, or is there something else that we should do, some modifications are due to
I think the
that?
answer is yes and yes. Yes, it has the structure that's helpful, and yes, we could do more. And we wrote a community white paper. Tim Moulton was lead author and put recommendations about this from the context of the GOOS Regional Alliance structure, which is one of the 4 pillars of how we implement GOOS, and that's the one that I'm most closely involved with. Along with, I'm sitting on the same floor with David Legler, who's in Craig's office, who implements the Global Ocean Observing System with the rest of the world from the US. And so the GOOS Regional Alliance structure is those nations who have observing systems and come together with sort of the lead has been IMOS in Australia and EuroGOOS in Europe and the US. And what we do there is we bring people together and talk about things like open data sharing and try to make people understand the value of that from those of us who actually have those habits. We try to build incremental projects together on technologies that could be shared in advance, like gliders and high-frequency radar, and so they extend those to other nations, and that's been working. I think we could do more structurally to support governments who don't have the resources. I don't know where we're going to find those resources, though, which is one of the biggest challenges. So when you tell people they need to do observing for their societies, and they're like, we don't have the resources to do that. So the other thing I'm going to have to do is go back and look at our recommendations from the white paper and make sure you have those.
Let's wrap it up and move to the panel right afterwards.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.